Let me ask you something. Do you remember the first time you hit $1,000 saved? Like actually saved, not I have $1,000 in my checking account that I'm definitely not going to spend on something stupid this weekend. Saved. That felt incredible, right? You finally felt like you were doing something, like you were ahead of the game, and then you hit $5,000 and you started to feel like maybe, just maybe, you had your life together. Then $10,000, and suddenly you're telling your friends you're building wealth at brunch like you've got a Forbes feature coming out next month. But here's the thing nobody warned you about. There's a number that completely rewires how money works for you, not in a small incremental way. In a way that makes everything you thought you understood about saving and investing feel like you were playing checkers while the wealthy were playing chess. That number is $20,000, and I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound that special. It's not $1 million. It's not even six figures. But I promise you, by the end of this video, you're going to look at that number completely differently. My name is Tate, and I break down personal finance in a way that actually makes sense for regular people who are tired of being broke but also tired of being talked down to by guys in suits on TV. If you're trying to build real wealth, starting from basically nothing, make sure you subscribe and hit that like button if this video gives you even one thing that changes how you think about money, because that one thing could be worth thousands of dollars to you over time. We're going to talk about why $20,000 isn't just a savings milestone. It's a psychological shift, a mathematical inflection point, and honestly, the moment your money starts doing things you never thought possible without you lifting a finger. Stick with me, because this gets really good. Here's what most people don't realize about the financial system we're all operating inside of. It was not designed with you in mind. I know that sounds a little cynical, but stay with me here. The entire consumer economy is built around keeping you at zero. Credit card companies, subscription services, car dealerships, buy now, pay later apps, their entire business model collapses the second you accumulate real savings. Because a person with $20,000 in an investment account makes completely different decisions than someone with $200 in a checking account. And that terrifies a lot of industries. The reality is the median American has less than $5,000 in savings. Not retirement accounts, not investments, liquid savings. The Federal Reserve has published data showing that roughly 37% of Americans couldn't cover an unexpected $400 expense without borrowing money or selling something. $400. That's a car repair. That's an urgent care visit. That's a flight home for a family emergency. And nearly 4 in 10 people are one unexpected bill away from financial chaos. Now here's where it gets genuinely alarming. And most people aren't at zero because they're not trying. They're at zero because of what economists call the poverty trap. And it applies way further up the income ladder than most people think. When you have no savings, every emergency becomes debt, and debt costs money. The average credit card interest rate right now is hovering around 21% to 24%. So when something goes wrong, and something always goes wrong, you borrow money at 22% interest to fix it, and then you spend the next 6 months paying that back, which means you can't save anything, which means the next emergency also becomes debt, and the cycle just keeps going. This is why the gap between people with a little money and people with no money is actually enormous, even if the dollar difference looks small on paper. Having $20,000 doesn't just mean you have $20,000. It means you've broken the cycle. It means emergencies don't become debt anymore. It means you can make decisions based on what's smart instead of what's desperate. And that changes everything downstream. Every financial decision you make for the rest of your life gets better the moment you hit that threshold. That's not motivation talk. That's just math. And we're going to show exactly how the math works. But here's where it gets interesting. Most people think about savings goals in a completely linear way. Like you save $1,000, then $2,000, then $3,000, and each step feels about the same. Progress is progress, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. The relationship between your savings balance and its impact on your life is not linear at all. It's exponential. And the jump from $10,000 to $20,000 is not twice as good as the jump from $0 to $10,000. It is categorically, qualitatively, fundamentally different in ways that most financial content never bothers to explain. Let's start with the psychological shift because this one hits before any of the math even kicks in. There's actual research from behavioral economists at places like Princeton and the University of Chicago showing that financial scarcity literally narrows your cognitive bandwidth. When you're constantly worried about money, your brain is running a background process 24 hours a day, dedicated to financial stress. That process takes up mental resources. It makes you worse at your job, worse in your relationships, worse at making long-term decisions. It's like trying to run a bunch of demanding apps on a phone that's already at 3% battery. Now here's the thing. That scarcity mindset doesn't turn off the second you hit $1,000 or even $5,000, because $5,000 in savings is still one medical bill, one car breakdown, one job loss away from zero. Your brain knows that. It stays in threat detection mode. But somewhere around the $15,000 to $25,000 range, and for a lot of people $20,000 specifically represents this, something shifts. You have enough buffer that your brain can actually stop running that background anxiety process. And when it does, your decision-making gets dramatically better. You start seeing opportunities you were too stressed to notice before. You negotiate your salary differently. You take smarter risks. You stop making desperate financial decisions because you're no longer desperate. Now you might be thinking, okay, Tate, that's interesting psychology stuff. Yeah, but what about the actual money math? Because I'm a numbers person and I want to see the receipts. Fair enough. Let's talk about what $20,000 actually does mathematically. That smaller amounts simply cannot. The first thing you need to understand is something called the compounding threshold. Everyone has heard of compound interest. Einstein may or may not have called it the eighth wonder of the world. The internet can't seem to agree on whether he actually said that, but whoever said it wasn't wrong. The problem is, compounding sounds amazing in theory and feels basically invisible in practice when your account balance is small. If you have $1,000 invested in a broad market index fund that returns an average of 10% annually, which is roughly what the S&P 500 has returned historically over long periods, you make $100 in year one. $100, that's 2 tanks of gas. Not exactly life-changing. So, people hear about compounding, they invest a little, they feel nothing, and they get discouraged. But here's where $20,000 changes the equation in a way that actually feels real. $20,000 at that same 10% return gives you $2,000 in year one. That's a month and a half of rent for a lot of people. That's a vacation. That's a car payment for a year and a half. You can feel that, and more importantly, your brain can start to see the trajectory. Because in year 2, you're not earning 10% on $20,000. You're earning 10% on $22,000. And in year 5, you haven't doubled your money. You've grown $20,000 to over $32,000 without adding a single additional dollar. In 10 years, that's over $51,000. In 20 years, it's over $134,000. From one single $20,000 moment that you never touch again. Now, compare that to someone who never quite got to $20,000. They've got $8,000 invested, same returns. In 20 years, that's about $53,000, which is good, but it's not $134,000. The person who pushed through to $20,000 ends up with more than double, not because they made double the contributions, but because compounding rewards larger bases disproportionately. The math genuinely favors you more the more you have, which sounds obvious when you say it out loud, but most people have never actually sat down and run those numbers side by side. Here's the part that will actually blow your mind, though. We've been talking about $20,000 like it's a static thing, like you get there and then you just watch it grow. But the real power of $20,000 isn't what it does on its own. It's what it enables you to do differently with every dollar you earn going forward. Think about it this way. When you have zero savings, every unexpected expense goes on a credit card at 22% interest. When you have $20,000 in savings, unexpected expenses come out of savings, and then you rebuild. No interest, no debt spiral. You just handle it and move on. Over a lifetime, the average American pays tens of thousands of dollars in interest on consumer debt. The person with a solid savings buffer avoids most of that. That's money that stays in your pocket instead of going to a bank. But it goes even further than emergencies. Having $20,000 in savings changes your negotiating position in ways most people never consider. You can quit a job that's underpaying you without panic because you have a runway, or 6 months of expenses gives you the leverage to walk away and find something better. And research consistently shows that people who job hop strategically, rather than staying put out of financial fear, earn dramatically more over their careers. The average salary increase from switching jobs is somewhere between 10% and 20%, compared to maybe 3% if you stay and wait for a raise. Over a 30-year career, that difference is not tens of thousands of dollars. It can be hundreds of thousands. $20,000 also opens the door to investments that simply aren't accessible below certain thresholds. Some real estate crowdfunding platforms have minimums. Certain brokerage accounts offer better rates and features to customers above specific asset levels. And if you're ever in a position to put a down payment on a property, having $20,000 available as part of that calculation changes what you can even qualify for. So here's what this actually means when you zoom out and look at the full picture. The journey to $20,000 is hard. It requires saying no to things. It requires boring weekends sometimes. It requires making decisions that feel like sacrifice in the moment. But the journey from $20,000 onward, it's a fundamentally different experience. Your money starts working alongside you instead of against you. Every dollar you save compounds faster. Every financial emergency stays an emergency instead of becoming a crisis. Every career decision gets smarter because it comes from a position of strength instead of desperation. There's a phrase I keep coming back to. The first $20,000 is the hardest money you will ever make. Not because the math is harder, but because you're making it with zero tailwind. No compounding helping you, no buffer protecting you, no leverage working in your favor. You're basically pushing a boulder uphill. But once you crest that hill, once you hit that $20,000 mark, the boulder starts rolling with you instead of against you. And that changes the entire game. I think about a friend of mine who spent years stuck between $3,000 and $7,000 in savings. Every time she got close to $10,000, something would happen. Car trouble, a medical bill, a month where things just got tight, and she'd be back at $4,000 feeling like she was starting over. She wasn't bad with money. She just hadn't broken through the threshold where her savings could actually protect her. 2 years ago, she made a concentrated push, cut back hard for 8 months, picked up freelance work on the side and got to $22,000. She told me it was the first time in her adult life she didn't feel like she was one bad day away from financial disaster. She's since negotiated a raise, started maxing her Roth IRA, and has over $40,000 in combined savings and investments. The $22,000 didn't just sit there. It launched her. So here's how you actually get there if you're not there yet. And here's how you make the most of it once you are. If you're below $20,000, your single most important financial priority right now is getting above it. Not investing aggressively, not optimizing your portfolio allocation, getting above $20,000 in liquid, accessible savings and investments. To do that, you need to know your exact monthly savings rate, the specific dollar amount you're putting away every single month. If that number is 0 or vague, start there. Pick a number, automate it, treat it like rent. Second, find one meaningful expense to cut and redirect it, not 10 expenses. 1. Something that frees up at least $200 to $300 a month. That's $2,400 to $3,600 a year. Meaningful. Real. Third, consider a short-term income push. A side gig, extra shifts, selling things, a skill you can freelance. Something that accelerates your timeline without having to be permanent. You don't have to do it forever. Just long enough to break through the threshold. Once you're above $20,000, split your focus. Keep 3 to 6 months of expenses in a high-yield savings account, which right now you can get around 4% to 5% on, and put everything above that into a tax-advantaged investment account like a Roth IRA or your 401k. Let compounding do what it does. The finish line isn't $20,000. That's actually just the starting line for the version of your financial life that actually works for you, but you cannot skip it. You cannot shortcut it. And once you're on the other side of it, you're going to wish you'd gotten there sooner. Go get it.